I have so many tabs open. Like, why? Though sometimes when you start doing research, then there's also like 17 tabs open, and then you keep on forgetting which one you actually was busy reading. Then you accidentally delete the one and you're like, no, what was that?
No.
Yeah, luckily there's this feature called history, so you can go back there, but that'll take forever.
Or you have a blackout like I did this morning, and then you start making up backup plans. Then you realize that your new laptop doesn't like losing the power, and so then you have to reset your entire laptop and open everything again.
Oh, that sounds like a fun Tuesday.
It's been a great Tuesday. Do you want to restore all your tabs? Yes, please.
I was beta reading. Luckily, it wasn't the entire novel. It was like 10,000 words, which is still a lot. But on a call with my beta reading group, they started discussing the person's pages, and I brought up the pages, and there was nothing. Yep. I was like, where did it go? Because I was very certain I did save those comments that I made. It was not a good day.
No, that's the worst, because it's like, I can't remember where all the spots were now, and I don't want to redo it all. I just spent 2 hours on this.
Exactly. And especially because when I do beta reading, I don't just like flimsily read it through and then I'm like, hey, okay, let's go. I literally go through sentence.
If you're my beta reader and you go super into the weeds, I'm like, thank you. Now I can do one editing pass.
Exactly.
Don't be nice. I already know. If I thought it was perfect, I would not have you read it.
Would have not asked.
I am just doing my apple juice today. I have to go shopping.
So I'm doing my rooibos tea today because I'm not at my own house. So whatever is in the person's cupboard, I drink, I guess. Alrighty. Are we ready?
So ready. Let's do this.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Tea and Tales. I'm Madeleine Einal.
And I'm Sarah Sampson. Thank you so much for joining us today and for all of the comments and shares that you have given us. We especially want to thank Gina Dobson and Shirley Brankovic. Thank you very much for supporting our podcast. Today we have our last episode in our NaNoWriMo series and a guest speaker. I'm so excited for this guest speaker.
I am super more excited because not only is she from Belgium, but she's also a nonfiction writer, and we haven't had a nonfiction writer on our podcast yet. So I'm very excited to be talking to Anneke Vliegen today.
Especially got this cup because this is my favorite cup, really, and I thought it was suitable for this.
Love it.
Oh, I love
And
that.
you know which tea it is?
Wait, tell me. Rooibos?
Rooibos, eh? Yeah, it's rooibos.
So tell us a little bit about your book that you have out, your memoir.
Recognize Me, yes. And it's a memoir, basically starting at my birth and going forward to 1.5 years ago, nearly 2 years ago now, where I had a neck operation. As a child, there was a lot of issues already, but none seemed connected. I basically ended up with an ME diagnosis, ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, which landed me a ticket to a lot of humiliation, ridiculing by professionals. I had one doctor, I had the results from a specialist with me, and he burst out laughing and said, "You don't believe all of this, do you?"
What?
Yeah. That's one of the examples. I'm laughing about it now, but my husband, I got back in the car and the car was too small for his anger. I was so used to that kind of attitude. Not that anybody had laughed out loud at me yet, but it was one of the major moments where he realized what medical gaslighting was. I mean, he'd seen it happen, he'd heard me talk about it, but this was quite extreme. I was subjected to that for 20 years. I was very close to death. I had said goodbye mentally the night before. The doctor was sitting on my bed and I said, if you don't call a halt to it, I'll just pass. And oops, we found something in your blood. There's actually something wrong with you that we can do something about. And that was adrenal insufficiency. And this is where the zebras keep coming up. You can see the one behind me, got the ones on the cover. And I've got Zelly. I know Zelly here, got Zelly, because doctors are trained to, when they hear hooves, think of horses. And so they give people that same treatment that you would give a horse. And they gave the advice, sleep plenty, move plenty, drink lots of water, eat healthily, whatever they came up with, I tried. But I clearly didn't do it well enough because I stayed ill, difficult patient. But, I belong to the zebras, the rare. That
I
really.
love that because most people will use unicorns. I do a lot of research into horses and stuff because of some of the books that I write
Yeah,
and because I'm a horse person, right?
yes.
And I came across a couple of years ago about how a lot of people think that zebras are like horses just with stripes, and it's so not right. Zebras are so different. The only thing the same is that they have hooves and they have noses. But
Exactly.
they are so different in how they act and how they need to be treated and their environment, everything. It makes so much sense to me to say, I'm a zebra.
Zebras
Yes.
actually exist. We're not some fictional, it's not a fiction that we invented,
Yeah.
which is what we get told. In my case, 20 years. And my story is far from the worst. And when I was writing it, I started to build community and stuff like that because I'd read somewhere that you have to have people chomping at the bit by the time your book's ready because otherwise it'll just sit on a shelf. And that was not my aim. I really wanted to get this out because medical gaslighting is an abuse of power. And always you'll see this with abuse of power, the victim carries shame and guilt and they stay quiet because of it. And I started talking about, in those communities, medical gaslighting is talked about and mentioned, but nowhere is it the main topic. And for me, it is. I'm like singly focused on that because I think it's so important that it is known about.
Absolutely.
So I did a Facebook Live and I received an email from someone saying, this is exactly what happened to me. I recognize all that you're saying. Nobody knows about this, even my partner.
Wow.
I was like, when I tell that story, and several months later, she posted on Facebook, this lady gave a talk and I recognized everything she said. And I thought, this is public. This is for the whole world, a Facebook post.
Yeah.
When,
And you're able to be that voice for those people. This is like my 9th year doing nano. It
wow.
is so easy to burn out when you're trying to rush to those 50,000 words. And I try to encourage people, stop worrying so much about the word count and to take care of yourself first. What better way does that make you the perfect person to talk about having a health and life balance in general, just health and life, much less health and writing balance. So
Exactly.
I wanted to ask you about what is the importance of a writing balance with your health, especially if you feel like you have a deadline or a goal you're trying to reach.
Actually, when it comes to deadlines, in the very first conversations I had with my publisher, she asked, what's your aim, blah, blah, blah. And deadline was one of them. I said, I don't do deadlines. Every weekday, I will write for an hour or up to 500 words. Like sometimes I wrote for an hour and I was at 750. Sometimes I wrote for an hour and I was at 300. Sometimes I wrote for 20 minutes and I had the 500 and that was enough for today. Thank you very much. So I gave myself a bit of a clause, to play with. And I managed to stick to that. But I had never written a book before. I knew I could write and touch people with my writings. That was clear from the way people responded to emails, to posts, I knew I could write a decent piece, but writing a book is a very different story. You have to maintain it. And certainly with my level of health and capacity, it wasn't a case of I'll sit down and I'll just write it because the whole story was here. I didn't have to invent anything, did I? I didn't need any imagination. Write all the stories that I've told so many times, or I thought I'd told so many times, because actually people closest to me who've known me for 30, 40 years, my parents who've been along on the ride all the time, all came back to me with, whoa, this was much worse than we ever realized. So having it in writing is very different. So if I'd had the capacity, it would be a case of sit down for a couple of weeks and do nothing but write, and your book will be ready. I didn't start knowing that you had to have a word limit and stuff like that, even. And then I figured I'll go to, I don't know what I said, 80,000 or something. And I ended up there, actually. But my publisher was aim for 60. Okay.
Mm.
But I didn't really have any concept of what that would be. So I didn't want to set myself a deadline in those terms. I stuck to the regular, that my goal was the regularity, and I managed that. But I think what's really, really important is that you know yourself well. Not only have I got the background of being a chronically ill patient, but also I was an occupational therapist in my working life, in my previous life, I always say. I was an occupational therapist and I'd done a postgrad in health research. So that also was a good position to write from, but it was also a very good position to do the analysis of what am I capable of? What is going to make me finish this? I didn't want this to be a project that after a couple of weeks I go, I don't fancy it today, I'll do it tomorrow. And then it just ends up in some cupboard somewhere, you know. I really wanted to do this. And so knowing yourself well and being honest with yourself and realistic, I think that is absolutely key.
It's very true that you say that you need to know yourself to know your limits. Otherwise, a lot of people say they want to write books, but saying you want to write a book and actually writing a book are two completely different things. And I think we spoke about it a lot in the previous episode where Sarah asked me, how do I do my writing while I have a full-time job, while I do all these other things? Yeah. And it is because I have that end goal of wanting to publish a novel, of wanting to have a career as an author, of having to, for you example, share your message to other people to let them know that they're not in this situation that they are in, and that there are other zebras that are also wandering around feeling lost, and that they can herd together and be a community. And so if you know that and you know your limitations, then that end goal you will make happen at your own pace. And I think that is brilliant of the publishing house, that they understood that and understood that, okay, this is your situation, this is your journey, and this is the capability you have as an author to be able to finish that project. And you did finish the project.
Yeah, I sure did.
Yeah, and publishers want you to know yourself that way. In my tips for Nano, that's my number one, is know yourself and start from there. If you don't start where you can start, you're gonna burn out in like 3 days. It's not gonna take long. And we talk about that nano first week slump. That's why it happens.
When I had decided I was going to start writing, and I realized how different writing a book would be to anything I'd ever done before. So I went and looked up some free courses, and I ended up at Readsy. I would really recommend them. And one of the exercises that was very important and crucial for me, and it was, when you start writing a book, you usually know what you want to give to your readers. And especially with something like I was writing, that was a goal for them. Write down why you're writing it for you. What's important to you about writing it? And I want to have a book published, I want to have my name known, for example, could be one of those. That wasn't particularly what I wanted. It was, for me, it was more about righting a wrong and maybe healing some of it. Actually, forget that. I wrote it without a tear. I don't think completely without a tear, but I wrote it. There were stories that I knew that I told a million times. It was just a case of writing them down. But when I read from it, I can't read to myself quietly, and I can't read out loud from it without holding back some tears. Yeah, so I'm not quite there yet on that score, but that was certainly on my list of reasons to write it. But there was many. I can't really think of them at the moment. I'd have to do the exercise again. I've got it somewhere. Obviously, I can go cheat. If I was to restart, if I was to write another book, I would write a new list, because it's going to be different now. I'm in a different stage having written one.
Very true. But it's also connected to what you are saying, is that because you will have to write your novel, you have to go through a first draft, through a second draft, through 10, 20 edits. You actually have to love what you're writing, because otherwise you're just going to be like, nah, just throw that away, not vibing with that right now. And I think we have spoken about that many times on the podcast so far, where we're like, you know what, not everybody is going to like your writing, not everybody is going to like your story, but that's okay, because you like it. And you like what it gives to other people as well.
And that I had to remind myself of several times. One issue was that as I built the community, I found out that really however bad my story is, there are much, much worse stories out there. And it nearly stopped me because it was like, what am I doing? Why am, not worth it? And then I realized that it's because mine isn't as bad as theirs that I'm capable of writing it. They're not left in a position to be able to write, even if they had better skills and better education than I had. Their health wouldn't allow it. So I still felt it was important that I did it.
Yeah. And you're that voice for those who don't have a voice.
Yeah, I try to be.
Yeah, which is brilliant.
But I'm very careful about that because it's always me, everything I post. I'm very aware of that, my blog, my Facebook page, and so forth. But people who've been medically gaslit have been talked for a lot.
Yeah.
And I do not intend to do that
Yeah.
for anyone. And also being in that zebra place, my experience is so clearly so different from most. And even among patients, one of the conditions I have, because it turned out a list of conditions, and one of them, EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, has a lot of comorbidities. And it's one of the things that came up. I just recently found that there's a kind of drop-in group that once a month or so, which I've now been to twice. But one of the things that was said there the first time I attended it was like, somebody said, I feel like an alien. And I said, well, I started to see it as being a different species. That our whole body is made up differently, and that there's not the predictability that you have when you belong to the norm. And so I'm careful about speaking for other people.
Because even if they do have the same syndromes, let's just say, even if they do have the same condition as you do, each person experiences it differently. And it's actually, as I was reading your biography, I was reading about you having the
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Yep, that one. Yes. And I was
Can't do that in Afrikaans.
I don't get it. And then it just gets lost on me. It's so interesting because when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, I recognize that, because I kid you not, Anneke, because at the moment I am writing a romantic suspense novel. And in one of the scenes, my main character is in handcuffs, and I want her to get out of handcuffs. But I don't
we can do that.
But I don't want her to use bobby pins, because I was like, that's so very cliche. I don't want to be cliche. So then I started Googling, okay, how can you get yourself, how can you get yourself out of handcuffs? And this one article I read was someone talking about the Ehlers syndrome, and that how some people can actually like get their hands out of it because of their flexibility.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? And I was like, my goodness gracious, I never even knew that was a syndrome until I actually did the research for something completely different. And I think that is such an interesting approach to take as well, because in all honesty, if I didn't have to Google how to get out of handcuffs, I might never have known what Ehlers syndrome was. So I think, and that is also the big thing about being a writer, is I feel it broadens your mind so much if you allow it. And I think it's such a beautiful thing, because just because I don't have Ehlers syndrome, just because I don't have multiple sclerosis, MS.
I'm going to leave you to that.
Can't.
I think it's funny.
Can't. The amount of bloopers that poor Sarah has to edit out because this keeps happening.
You've got to leave this joy in for the listener. Go on.
Brilliant. But yes, the amount of, and so just because I don't have it doesn't mean I can't empathize with someone and can't. Exactly. I almost want to say make an awareness of it, because my character has MS, or my character knows someone who has MS, and then someone reading my novel could be like, "Oh, never knew that was a thing." And so I love what you say, because yes, nobody is in anybody's shoes. You can try to understand them, you can try to support them, but you will never know what it would be like in someone else's shoes. And so to have a memoir from someone like you, and to be like, oh my goodness, this is what you went through as a person, I think that's just...
And the things I do is mention what was going on politically, because the situation with people with ME and CFS in particular really is still a political issue as well, and a social issue. And those things I do raise, and I always link them to my story, but I'm not going to go into it, because that's this. There's just so much to tell, and I get so frustrated and angry about it still that But read the book. You'll find out. Maybe that's a good plug.
There you
Yeah.
go. Read the book.
Yes, read the book, find
That-
out. Now I
I
want to
know.
because it's like inspiration, like full of inspiration. You took
Yeah.
inspiration from your real life. Nella's taking inspiration from something she found that she can then research. And I'm taking inspiration from hearing your story. And we're going to put it into nonfiction, into fantasy, into romance, but it's still all inspiration. And that I love that you say, write what inspires you. That's how you're going to get words out. If you try to force yourself into an avenue you're not inspired by, you're going to get stuck. And that's just the worst feeling in the world. The other thing I love that you said in there was don't worry about the publishing, don't worry about anything else. Write what you need to have in there. I want to hear more about that because I hear that you have a great analogy you like to use with this involving sandcastles.
Yep.
I have
I'm
to
not
hear this.
sure I came up with it. I think I picked it up along the way somewhere. So if somebody wants to claim their right to it, please do. I'm sure I've shaped it into what fits me. One of the things, again, from these courses was do a brainstorm, but it's not one of those where you
Brain map?
put the headings, a diagram. Yeah. Just make sure that all the points you want to have raised are there already in just simple words. So, have a picture in your mind of a mind map. That's what it's called. Have a picture in your mind of what you want the end castle to look like. But the first thing you need to do is just gather all the sand. Gather the sand that you will need. Go on the beaches and, how sticky do I need it? How much will I need? Just dump it in some box or on a pile or whatever. Just get it all there. And then start to make a general shape. Once you've got the general shape, you kind of look and go, I think I want to turret more, and I think I want an extra block here and a one less there. And, you do that kind of stuff. And then you start crafting that. I loved that phase, the crafting of the words and the sentences, the restructuring, the things that really felt not like writing as in writing sentences, but actually crafting them. Finding synonyms that actually are at the right layer of what I wanted to say. Then you go and look for shells and for seaweed and for whatever else to put in place before you can call it finished. And it's never really finished anyway. But that's how I felt the process. And that was also part of remaining healthy with the writing, because you start writing and you write your first chapter and then you go and edit it, you'll never get to the second chapter because you'll keep editing. Even when the book's finished, you keep doing that, don't you? There is just a point where you have to say, that's it. Even when my publisher said, because I did hybrid publishing, so I had a lot of say right to the end. So she sent me the last proofreading, the results of the last proofreading. And I just wanted to not check the proofreading, but just, enjoy my writing. Just went through that. And I saw a mistake. And I thought, shit, I need to read through this. And I found 30 more! 30!
Oh my goodness.
It never ends.
But having said that, both my parents have read the book. My dad's read it twice. They were both teachers. My mum was a language teacher, and neither of them have come up with any mistake that they've found in it. And not twice. My dad found it very, very important to tell me that the stories that I've written that he remembers the same, or maybe some detail that's slightly different because our experience will have been different. But really, in essence, I've been truthful, and he thinks that's very important, and I do too. I'm going to put this like, here we go. Look at that. I've got a circle in my glasses. So actually dumping all the words and having a set pattern there has to be some pattern to it to actually look after yourself as well, because you'll stop if you don't have a pattern. And I don't care if it's half an hour every fortnight, as long as you stick to that half an hour. Or it can be like we said, I'm going to write it within a fortnight, the whole book. Do it if that's you. But first dump all the words. And when you get to a block with that, you've got your mind map, you can use that. But also, there's always something there that you can write. Even if it just seems plain stupid at that point, just write it. You're writing it for you at that point. As whatever you're thinking actually like mine was chronological. So if it would have been something like, oh, that doesn't fit there because it happened 5 years later, well, it doesn't matter. I'll write it now. And the in-between bit will come to me at some other point. Just write.
Just do it. Yeah. Just get going and get
And
into that habit, and a healthy habit, not what you think people want you to do.
don't do that. Really.
Don't do that.
Don't do it in life, and don't do it in writing.
Yeah.
Very important. Make sure that you enjoy your writing. I mean, you won't enjoy every moment of it. It will get boring and you will get stuck, and there will be painful stuff to write as well. And there will be research to do that you really don't want to do. You just want to be writing at that point and whatever else. But there's bits you can do. Like you can have a Zello with you, for example. You know, that really helps. You can have an orange blanket that you hide under every time.
There
See?
you go.
You can have rooibos tea.
I feel that's not
I
one
know.
priority.
Yeah.
Mine's hot chocolate. I keep hot chocolate next to me when I write. But it's also cold in November, so here, where I am.
Here as well. But
Us in that northern hemisphere.
gold. But my routine was I didn't have a set time, but it always was somewhere in the afternoon, in the late afternoon. That's just how it worked out. And I'm sure there was exceptions to that. I allowed exceptions to that as long as I stuck to my hour or 500 words. So before I started, I made sure I had a glass of water, put that ready. I made sure I had a hot drink. That varied depending on what I wanted at that time. Had that ready with me. In fact, for the first part, until I got sick of doing that, I always made a little teapot. I had one of those little teapots, and I made that. Make it joyful. Do what makes you thrive. Even when the writing then isn't particularly joyful for whatever reason, you just got yourself into that mode, and it's fine. And I did get stuck at one stage because the resources I'm using, I guess, are different to when you're writing fiction. I had emails to go through. I hadn't kept a diary, but I'd kept a blog for a good few years. And so when I got to the stage where I'd started that blog, I thought, oh, this is going to be the easy part. You know, just cut, paste. Great. Well, it didn't quite work out like that. And it jarred. Something really, really jarred. And I wanted to just write as I had been writing up to then, just from memory, just from what came up and flowed. But I didn't want to miss the important points I had made in my blog, and I didn't quite know how to go about that. And I went against that jarring for quite a while until I thought this is going to ruin my book. I can't keep doing that. And then I decided I am going to start editing now so that I can feel what it is and where it is that it's jarring. Not because I want the finished product to be ready up to the point now, but so that I know what it is. What is it that's so difficult?
Can I just say I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I think the piece of advice to don't edit until you're done is valid and it's good. But also, if you are stuck, going back sometimes will jar that loose because, oh, I forgot I was doing that over here and I need to fill that out and then your story starts moving again. And so if that's where you're at, if you need to take a day to go back and review what you've already done and where you want to be, it can get you past those stuck points.
But I think that's crucial, the way you put it. If it is to review and evaluate where you are and where you need to be, that's different from actually going back and trying to edit every last fault out of what you've written. Just leave the mistakes in. It's all right.
Yeah. I tend to, when I write, whatever I wrote the day before or the week before, I will go back to that paragraph just to kind of catch me up on what I was doing. And I'm like, where are these characters right now? Because I cannot, for the life of me, and I have mentioned this before, I cannot write out of chronological order. It tickles my toes.
I guess when you go back to the sandcastle, once you start shaping and just making the plump shape, you already do a bit of that needs to be flat, you know, and that's what you're doing. It's not I need to have the details in this corner and all the rest is still ruins. I mean, it doesn't work like that.
I love it. Oh, I'm going to use that.
I feel like your next novel should be called Sandcastles. Throwing it out there. Don't know what it's about, but sandcastles.
I have lots of ideas for titles for following books.
You're talking about making sure that you've taken care of yourself. Even just the fact that I'm going to write, let's put water on my table. I think a lot of times those writers forget those things. And if we forget to plan for those things or put it into our patterns, then we end up giving ourselves propensity to getting ill or getting tired or all of those things that come with just being human. Even if you think you're the healthiest person, you have to take care of your body or your mind will stop working. I very much appreciate all of the advice that you've given today. Your vibrancy, your smile, it just makes me think I can do this.
Now I just want to go to every bookstore and go buy a copy of your novel and just give it out to everybody and be like, read, go read, be free, little one.
Actually, I have people who have bought several copies and gone to their doctors and said, here, you need to read this.
Nice.
It's actually a very loving gift to that friend who is chronically ill, who may not ever even have given you an inkling of them being medically gaslit. I can tell you they have been. If they have a chronic, barely visible, fluctuating condition, you can bet your bottom dollar they've been gaslit at some point by the medics, by the social services, And it's a very loving gift to give because you're not asking of them, you're not invading their privacy, and you're saying, I get it. I can't get it, but I get it.
I support you. I'm here.
I'm here. Yeah. You can tell me about it if you want to. I'm a safe place. And if you don't, I'm equally safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please do. And give it to your doctors.
There we go. There we go.
Whatever.
I want to give it to my doctors, that's for sure.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
I've been so excited about this episode and talking to you because I was watching some of your YouTube interviews and I was reading about your journey and all that stuff, and I was like, you have such a kindness about you, and I think that is what people need in this world, and I do recommend and I urge people to go out and go buy this novel because I think it can only help them understand other people better.
And there's always going to be little tidbits that we can take into our own life no matter where we're at. I do have one more question for you, Anneke, before we end. We have our Slap Me with a Wet Fish episode coming up. And in this episode, we are talking about our readers' favorite novels and favorite authors that are not popular authors, people you want other people to know more about.
Gresham, because he's well known.
Yeah, not an everyday name, but somebody that has inspired you that you wish more people knew about.
The one I immediately think of is a Dutch, and I very much doubt his books have been translated. So I don't know whether that's appropriate, really. Here, let me think.
Throw it at me.
Robert Long.
Okay.
It actually sounds like an English name, doesn't it? Robert Long.
Yes.
He was a musician,
Dutch singer and TV show host.
He is.
Got him.
You know that? You know him? You've just got it. You've Googled it. You cheat.
No.
But he was of great support to me when I was in my teens. And in my late teens, he brought out his first book. And I'm reading one of his where he's writing letters to a friend. And so they're both writing the book. Cease. I don't even remember the surname of the other guy. And I'm really enjoying it because it's letter I've found since I've started writing my book, but it's stuck with me. I'm finding it difficult to read other people's, and it's kind of expected that you do that. That I'd be reading other chronically ill people's books, and if there's anything that's going to depress me, it's that. It's difficult. But also, I'm really having difficulty with the reading of other people's materials, even in blogs and. I don't know what that's about. I think I'm lettered out or something like that.
You need a break, maybe.
I know. That's the best I can find.
You read
That's
some romance. Wink, wink.
Yeah. I like Catherine Cookson or something like that as like light. Just get me out of. I've got some of those. Maybe I should try that after this letter. Because this is in letters, it's easier. Because you can put it to one side and just go back weeks later because they've been written with weeks in between anyway. So, it works well for me. But yeah, he's not so well known.
Well, that's good.
He's an important figure in my life, yeah. And his husband I was in preschool with.
Well, isn't that a small world?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I knew his husband before he knew him.
so cool.
We had a
Not to
reunion.
brag, but
It was a reunion when we became 50, and I didn't dare go up to him and say, "Are you the widower of Robert Long?" I mean, that didn't quite sound very sympathetic. So, and I just didn't anyway. I was really intimidated by the whole thought. But then Facebook came up with, because Facebook gathered that we'd been in the same place. So I'm just going to write him a message. That was kind of safe because he could just ignore that and I wouldn't particularly have to notice. But no, he said, "So why didn't you talk to me?" "Because I daren't. And now you're regretting it, aren't you?" "Yeah."
Oh, goodness.
So yes.
Anneke, I have had so much fun talking with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so, so glad that you asked me and that you gave me this opportunity to talk. And yeah, I love it. And I really love your style. I've said it before, I've written it to you, but it's so true.
We like to keep it short and simple here on Tea and Tales. Get your fingers back on the keyboard and your pen back to paper.
And if you love what we are doing here, and if you love all the guest speakers, go to Instagram and Facebook and follow us at Tea and Tales Podcast, or TikTok and Twitter/X at Podcast Tea Tales. And don't forget to go to that purple icon and go give us 5 stars. What you also should be doing is typing in who your favorite author is that is not super famous, or a novel that you would think people would want.
Anneke Vliegen, she's
There you
really
go.
good.
She is very good.
Not well known yet, but she's excellent.
She's
really.
getting there. She's getting there.
Leave us a comment about your favorite author or book on any of our social platforms, or email us, or on any of our places you are listening to us now. Happy writing.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.